Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Laguna Beach Living podcast. Today, I'm here with Malcolm Warner, who's the executive director of Laguna Art Museum. Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for joining me today.
Great to be with you.
It's wonderful to meet you. I'm so excited to ask you all sorts of questions. I'm curious how someone becomes executive director of a museum. But first, I want to just learn about you and your background. I'm assuming you're from the UK.
That's correct. Yes. Yes.
So tell me more about that.
Well, I grew up in quite a small town, not very far from London, but it felt far away from London, frankly, because it wasn't a very cultured, sophisticated place, particularly. I got to know a little bit about art just because I fell in love with art books. It started with books. You know, we had no museum in my hometown, and certainly there was no art in the family. My parents didn't, they weren't collectors or anything.
Yeah.
And I just loved art books. From the public library, I would get a different set of books out. It was just, I'm old enough that it was practically the beginning of really gorgeous color reproductions in art books. Older art books were all in black and white, but it was in the 1960s into the 70s. It was this big explosion of color in art book publishing, and I think that's what got me going. And then without really knowing what I was doing, I applied to this very specialized college called the Courtauld Institute, which is part of the University of London, to study art history.
The Courtauld?
Yeah, the Courtauld Institute.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Yeah, it was a great place to study that particular subject.
What was it exactly? What did you study again?
So, history of art.
Oh, okay.
It was called History of Art and Architecture.
Wow.
Yeah.
So your public library had those amazing art books. That's awesome.
Yeah, hats off to public libraries.
Yeah.
They can change a young person's life like that.
I was recently in London, and I love that there is amazing access to art museums there that's free.
Yes.
And I think that's so important.
Yeah. Well, that was another thing that I was able to do. When I got a little bit older, when I was 18, before I went to college, I did start to go up to London on the train. That was my exciting day out, and go to the National Gallery, which is the big paintings museum. And that was just so eye-opening for me because it was so different from my rather dismal hometown. There were all these gorgeous impressionist paintings full of sunshine and light and beautiful people, the like of which I didn't see very often in real life.
How far were you from London?
I was only about 40 miles or something, 45 minutes on the train. But it was a world apart. Well, the world of art in the museum was just like a totally different world. And portraits were very exciting to me too. I remember, paintings of real people who'd lived maybe in the 1400s or the 1500s. It was so inspiring to me to think that, that I was almost like in the real presence, because the portraits are really bring home the feeling that you could, here's a real person you can almost communicate with, and yet they died 500 years ago. And that was, profound, I don't know why, but that was very exciting to me too.
Mm-hmm. And so when you were going back and forth in London, you would just, the political climate at the time, what was that like? Just growing up then?
I was probably pretty unaware of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was the early 70s especially was a tough time in England. But I don't know, I think I led a kind of sheltered life. It was, and in the... when I was studying at the Courtauld Institute doing my undergrad studies, really, it was like an ivory tower. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did you end up in Laguna Beach? So what happened after your studies?
If you study art history and want to pursue it as a career, you've got two ways of going, really. Teaching. Or working in museums. Those are the two main options. And I did a little teaching, but I always was drawn to the idea of working in a museum. And I started to get, when I was doing my graduate work, I started to get the occasional gig with a museum as a freelance, like guest curator for an exhibition or something like that. And eventually, I got to know people in that museum world, both in England and a little bit in the United States as well. And then I met my wife, who's American, and we got married and decided to live in the US. Partly because there are so many more opportunities in in the museum world here.
Which I think is surprising,
Yeah,
I
I
would
know.
say,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, you would think that Britain is so cultured and so many museums, but actually there's not much movement. You know, people get a job there and you have to wait for them to die before you...
Yeah, okay, got it.
Where here things are a bit more dynamic and interesting. So I managed to get my foot in the door of the American museum world with a temporary job at the Art Institute of Chicago, and then, which is where my wife is from, Chicago. And but that had to come to an end. But I then started applying for museum jobs, and the first regular job was in San Diego at the San Diego Museum of Art. The thing about the museum profession is that you have to be prepared to move. You know, it's not like being a dentist. You know, there are hundreds of dentists in any given city, but there are very few people who work in a museum. You've got to be ready to go where the jobs are, and there are few of them.
And a museum that reflects the type of art that you're interested in as well, right?
Yeah. Right. Yes.
So yeah, not very many then.
It's specialized. And so I worked in this. To cut a long story short, I worked for a few years at the San Diego Museum, then moved to Yale University, where they have a museum dedicated to British art, which is something I know a lot about.
Yeah.
So for a few years, I was a curator there. And then I moved to the Kimball Art Museum at Fort Worth, Texas, and then from there to here. And up until this point, I was actually a curator, not a director. There's a difference between those two jobs.
I was just going to ask.
Yeah, the curator is more concerned with the nitty-gritty of building the collection and putting together exhibitions, especially. That's what exhibitions are what curators spend most of their time orchestrating.
Who does the copy for the exhibition?
That's the curator usually.
Wow.
You know, writing the book that goes with the show, yes.
And that's a lot of work as well.
Actually, you put your finger on it. The writing of those catalogs, which everybody loves, and we do them now almost every time we do an exhibition. We publish a book on the subject. And it's a very demanding thing on a...
Yeah, I think there's so much thought that goes into it, and then being able to articulate something that is so visual, that would be so difficult to do. So you really have to have experience in writing. Is that what you learn in school as well?
Yeah, I think you learn good writing by practice. And if you want to hear one of my kind of pet peeves is that...
Would love to hear. I love pet peeves.
The younger people now, it's becoming rarer and rarer for younger people to know how to put together a decent sentence.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they don't have great ideas. They probably do. But just the craft of writing nicely so that it's grammatically correct and clear, those simple things, it's almost like a dying art form. I don't want to be too
how do
depressing,
people text you? People that know your pet peeves, your children.
Well, you can forgive anything in a text or whatever, but it's writing in a more formal context. I think that's
lost.
Yeah, it's not lost entirely, but I'm always telling younger people in the museum business, especially curators who have to do a lot of writing, to read the New Yorker and read it like you're learning how to write like that, because that's like a model of just beautiful, well-crafted writing.
I love that. I think that's just good advice for everyone, really.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing. I think that's just really interesting. It definitely is really interesting to learn more about your journey and going from curator to director and what that entails now. I know in editorial work, there's just so much scheduling, and you really have to schedule things so far in advance. So I'm curious how the Laguna Art Museum, I know that you mentioned you worked on a documentary for the 100 years to celebrate that. So yeah, how far in advance?
We're always looking quite far ahead. As a smaller museum, we can be a little bit more nimble and change our minds and put things into effect very quickly. So probably compared with one of the big lumbering museums like the Metropolitan in New York or the Art, we probably do things more on the spur of the moment than they do. But still, even so, we're still looking always like 1 or 2 or 3 years down the road, especially with our planning of exhibitions, because exhibitions are a logistical achievement, really. You have to negotiate the borrowing of paintings or whatever from other museums and from private collectors, some of whom you might have to cajole a little bit into agreeing to lend, and then orchestrating all the transportation and the insurance and all these practical things. So it's a good thing that when people come to an exhibit at a museum, it all looks natural, as if it happened like a work of nature or something. But there's actually a lot of nitty-gritty work and moving parts to it. And the best shows tend to be the ones that you planned well ahead, so you had plenty of time to get all those details right.
Yeah. So does the museum curate different types of art as well, like sculpture?
Yes.
I would assume that's the most difficult to have logistically.
Yes.
For shipping.
We are planning a sculpture exhibition, a couple of sculpture exhibitions coming up. Actually, this summer we're opening a show of the LA sculptor Gwyn Murrell, who specializes in these beautiful, sleek, rather abstracted animal sculptures.
Oh, cool.
And then up ahead, another sculptor. We always have to put a bit extra in the budget for moving sculpture around. It's heavier, bulkier. Most people don't realize that when you do move a work of art, whether it's a sculpture or a painting, actually, from one museum to another for a special exhibit, usually it involves building a whole massive crate with special lining in it to hold the thing steady and safe.
That's unbelievable.
So there's a lot.
So is there a special person that you work with each time that creates that crate? So you have a relationship with them, you trust them,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the way it usually works is that there are people on the staff at the museum who know all about that kind of thing. The registrar and the collections manager, they're usually are their titles, and that's the case with us. And they generally work with outside businesses that specialize in art moving.
Wow.
So we don't do it all on our own, but it's still quite a job to
manage. And for you have to you're managing obviously the art that's happening in there and the exhibitions and everything, but also, donations, right? So how the Laguna Art Museum is a nonprofit.
Yes.
So it's run off of donations from the community.
Yeah, we largely depend on donations of one kind or another. We're always applying for grants from foundations who, might want to support a particular kind of art, and so if we're doing an expensive exhibition that falls within the remit of a particular foundation, we're always doing research looking for sources like that. Yeah, and we depend a lot also on the goodwill of the people of Laguna Beach, and I'm happy to say they generally rise to the occasion.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, we have a lot of very dedicated supporters here. They tend to fall into two groups, and this is true of our board of trustees too. There are people whose support we enjoy because they love art and they want to support. Usually, they want to support a particular kind, maybe modern art or the California Impressionists from the early 20th century or something like that. And then on the other hand, we also benefit a lot from the tremendous sort of good feeling that a lot of people around here have about Laguna Beach, because they associate it with art. They think of it as an art town. And even if art isn't exactly their passion, they still think it's just a good thing that there's a museum, that there's an art museum. So bless them. That's the
Yeah.
other kind of support we get.
So, how would you describe the focus of Laguna Art Museum? What type of art you focus on?
Well, we specialize in California art. So we look to be the best possible showcase for the achievements of California artists from the 1800s to today. So, at the moment we have on show a painting that was done in the 1830s. It was one of the earliest paintings of a California subject ever, actually. And then right down to paintings done last year or the year before. So we cover a wide range of dates, and we cover the whole state too. We'll show the work of Northern California artists. We had an exhibition of the great Wayne Thiebaud, who's one of our favorite artists. And I'm glad to say we're one of his favorite museums too.
Wow, that's wonderful.
And he lives in Sacramento. And it's the same with San Francisco artists too. However, we certainly have a bias towards more local art, both in the sense of Southern California generally and more specifically Laguna Beach. So we in our scheduling of exhibitions, we'll always play up good artists who lived around here, basically.
Oh, that's
and
wonderful.
There are plenty of them.
And you recently, I missed the nighttime event with all the lights.
Well, that's one of the things I'm proudest of because I introduced it to the museum. Every year we do this event called Art and Nature, which is a sort of celebration of the two big things of Laguna Beach, really, when you think about it. What do people associate with this place? Art and a beautiful environment. So we try and bring those two things together by having, we have like a keynote speaker who might be the world's expert on Leonardo da Vinci, talking about Leonardo da Vinci and nature or something like that. And we commission a work of art to go with this festival. It's over a long weekend in early November. And yes, last time we commissioned the artist Elizabeth Turk to create a performance. A lot of artists now may make physical objects, but they also create events. And that's a legitimate part of creative art now, is creating great events. And she created this event for 1,000 volunteers all out there on the beach, cavorting around with illuminated umbrellas.
Wow.
Yes, she specially designed this kind of umbrella that has like an X-ray of the interior of a shellfish, and a beautiful symmetrical design on the outside. And it was illuminated from underneath, so the stick of the umbrella had a light in it. So as it got darker on the beach, the event started around 5 or 6 o'clock. These umbrellas all kind of just stood out more and more as it got darker, until it was quite a magical kind of appearance that this whole mass of people with these umbrellas moving around. It looked almost like sea creatures were dancing around on the edge of the foam of the waves as they came in.
I saw photos. They were so beautiful, and I had major fear of missing out. So I'm bummed I missed it, but I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, we'll keep doing them.
So how did that come together though? Did she approach you, and then or did you approach her and give her a platform to share ideas? Yeah,
we generally pick the artist. We do a lot of research, look around. We knew Elizabeth Turk. She lives in several different places, but one of them is Newport Beach. So she's kind of local. And she grew up around here, so she was very happy. And she's been associated with the museum off and on in different ways for a long time. We even did an exhibition of her work quite separately a few years ago. So she hadn't done anything like this before, but because we admired her work so much, she's a fantastic person. She got that Genius grant one year, that famous thing. So she's an inspiring person who, we thought it would be good to try and get her to do this new thing that she'd never done before. And she certainly she rose to the occasion.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And she's going to try and do it other places now.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's going to be really cool.
So-
Just the idea of eliminate or the same exact thing.
The same thing,
Wow.
yeah.
That'll be incredible. Maybe I'll have to follow her and
Yeah,
go to one of those.
I'll keep you posted.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where where the second performance will be of this thing, but
So,
yeah, it was. People said it was down there on the beach. It was like the best party they'd ever been to. Just this magical thing of having these objects. It's surprising what a community atmosphere you can create from getting people all to dress the same way. Everyone's dressed in black, and to have this one object that they can use in different ways to make interesting, like, light effects and things. And there were spontaneous little ad hoc dance troupes broke out.
oh, really?
Where they would all be doing the same thing. So yeah, it was terrific.
That's what I love about art. It's just, I don't know, there's something in you. It's so inspiring. It's moving, emotionally freeing. I mean, there's just so many beautiful aspects of how you can, someone can, this feel good, this feeling of feeling just so good from looking at something or being part of something.
Yes.
And, or creating something if you're the artist. And I think that it's so important to have that as part of any community or any even childhood experience. I mean, I think we're so blessed here too to have schools like Annalise that nurtured that aspect and the creativity in our children.
Yes.
Do you guys work with kids a lot, or?
Yeah, we have a very active education program because sadly, many schools are pulling back for budget reasons
program,
on their art programs. So we're trying to fill the gap a bit around here, and we also have a lot of outreach to Santa Ana, where the Boys and Girls Club and the schools maybe really need our help more than the more affluent schools around here in Laguna Beach. So we make a point of trying to get school groups here. We send out teaching artists out to them as well, and try and we usually use our whatever exhibition we have at the moment. We'll devise art making programs and art history talks for schools and kids generally, and take them to the kids, and then bring the kids to the museum to see the exhibit. And some of those kids from Santa Ana, they've never seen the ocean before. So that's if we can provide them with a bus to come here and see the museum, they get that as a bonus.
Yeah, see the museum, see the ocean, and be part of. I mean, it's so nice to just be part of nature.
It's crucial to get them while they're young too, because it's one of the saddest things, going back to what you were just saying, is when adults have surrounded themselves with all these inhibitions about enjoying art. They think art has to be a certain way. It has to be a picture of a pretty landscape or something. So they'll say, "What, you want me to dance around on the beach with an illuminated umbrella? That's ridiculous." And they're resistant to doing that, which you obviously are not.
No.
So and that's something that I think is people who are more open and willing to go along with the creative spirit of art. It's often because they've preserved that from their childhood and haven't let grown-ups beat it out of them.
So thank
So good
you.
for you.
Well, thank you, but thank you for reminding people that is within them, because even though it gets beat out, it's still somewhere there, and they just need to nurture it and see that it's possible for everyone to enjoy that. I think there's just preconceived notions of who or what type of person enjoys art too, and either it's like a hippie person that's just super free and crazy maybe, or that's what people think, or someone who just is very affluent and can afford to enjoy art. I think that, but that's not necessarily the case, because art comes in many forms. And so I just really appreciate what Laguna Art Museum is doing, and you, and It's so wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing
me.
more about the museum. And I'm looking forward to hopefully just being more involved.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Great.